Simon here tonight. I appreciate y'all coming tonight. This is going to be a great treat. So I don't want to take up any of his time. I want him to speak and to be able to share with you, because every time I'm able to listen to Ronnie speak, I just learn so much. And so I'm excited for y'all to be here tonight. I'm going to open us in a word of prayer, and then Ronnie's going to come up, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening. God, I pray that you will minister to our hearts tonight. God, we thank you. We thank you for Israel. God, how you have used your people in order to be a light to us. Lord, that you gave them the good news from the very beginning, and Lord, it has spread to us. I pray that we'll be faithful with the message that you've given. I pray, Heavenly Father, that we will learn tonight, and God, that we will have a stronger heart and a stronger love for Israel. God, you have called for us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. God, you've called us to bless your people. And God, may we do so. But we thank you for Ronnie, and I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Mr. Ronnie, if you'll come and teach us tonight.
Good evening. I'm sure that there are some people over there because the projectors are in my eyes. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. I want to thank Pastor Eric for the opportunity, not my first time, to share with you some news from the Middle East. And after you get used to my funny accent, it will be easier for you to follow what I'm going to try, the message I'm going to try to deliver. I'm not a very disciplined speaker, let me say it right away. And therefore, information is going to come up and down on the screen. And I'm going to just stick to my spiel, and you have to synchronize the two. So this is a bit of a challenge, but I'm sure that this will not be such a big obstacle. Well, everything that I do in the US recently is under the umbrella of what we call the Galilee Academy. It's COVID days. We were bored. We had nothing better to do. So a friend of mine and myself decided to found a virtual academy. And if you are more interested in what happens in Israel, the biblical perspective, history, I encourage you to Google and go to the website, and maybe it will be beneficial for you to learn more about the country. The plan for this evening is a very unpleasant topic to speak about that we can no longer avoid. And I've been doing this for many years, and I could tell that until about 10, 15 years ago, when I spoke about the Middle East, especially among evangelical Christians, friends of Israel, most of them, I could get their partial attention because it happens so far away. It's not really our immediate concern. We are praying for the peace of Jerusalem, but it's the other part of the world. I think that today I can get Americans' attention very easily because we are part of it as well. And it happens everywhere. It's not limited to the Middle East. We are dealing with a global issue, and I would like to present that tonight for you. Now, since I'm an Israeli myself, it's very hard for me to be objective in the presentation I'm going to give you, all right? There are good guys and bad guys. I'll try to be as neutral as I can. There's so much propaganda out there without me adding to that, all right? But the facts are facts, and at least people need to understand the facts. And the question is, how do we to understand what we see in front of our very eyes in the Middle East? And this is a very dynamic issue. It changes almost on a daily basis. And many people are confused because most people, let's admit that, get their information from the media. How many of you are going to do your own research and find out what exactly happens over there? So you turn on the TV, you're tired after a day of work, and you hear something and you make an opinion, sometimes based on nothing. And therefore, at least we need to understand some fundamental issues which are affecting basically, I would say, everybody on the planet right now. And I would prefer to start with a more overview of the Middle East and then zoom in and speak more directly and kind of focus on the Israeli, let's say, Palestinian Hamas conflict in the Gaza area, not because Hamas is an existential threat for the state of Israel, but through understanding the mindset of one group, all right, times millions, you begin to understand the mindset of people that simply have a different way of thinking. Sometimes you watch the Middle East and you think to yourself, how complicated things can get over there. Are they fighting for land? Is it about refugees? Can't you cut a deal? It's so simple, because we are using a healthy American common sense, whatever that is. The problem is that nothing in the Middle East is based on common sense Nothing is based on let's negotiate. It's a different way of thinking. And for years and years and years, the whole world was in the opinion that we have to leave the debate over there on the political level. Well, that was a big mistake because it was always about religion. But people understand, as they do today, because you can't hide it anymore, that once you speak about religion, it's a dead end. You can't make progress to any direction because your God did not authorize you to make concessions in his behalf. So what are politicians good for to negotiate when your own religion doesn't give you such permission? So I think that we can all agree today that when you speak about what happens in the Middle East, you can no longer look to the other side to say, politics, they'll find a solution. No, we are at the place that the whole thing is about religion, whether you admit it yes or no, and it looks like a dead end. Now, it's not a pleasant topic that we're going to speak about tonight, but we need to understand the truth. Let me ask you a question. What is the big problem of Iran with the state of Israel? We don't share a border. We never had any kind of conflict, unless you go back to the days of Esther and Mordecai. Maybe that's why they don't like us today. But they're not even Arabs to say that they are representing solidarity with the Arabs. So what is the problem of Iran with Israel? Is it territory? Is it people, population? In one word, Islam. Because Iran is one of those countries that the motivation on the table, they don't even hide their intention, is the Muslim agenda. And once it comes to the Muslim agenda, we need to understand what exactly that means. I won't even tell you that they are wrong and we are right. It's a different way of thinking. We're not on the same level to understand one another. And therefore, when the West is negotiating with powers like Iran, we need to understand their mindset. Now, if you're confused and I'm confused, that's not a problem. When presidents are confused, when governments don't really understand what happens, that's a problem. And if your advisor that advises you about the Middle East, graduate from Yale and Harvard, he doesn't know the Middle East. It's not about education. It's about understanding a certain mindset that unless you live through that, will be very hard to understand. So when governments are making decisions based on information, I don't want to say fake, but misunderstanding the whole concept over there, how can you make a good choice and a good decision when you don't understand the other side? Now, once again, I have to take sides here, but I try to be very careful. So the topic for tonight, and amazing that it's even working, James taught me something new here, but it's working. All right, will be basically to speak more about Gaza, but just as an example, not because Hamas is what Hamas is, but what Hamas represents. Let me start with a quote from the book of Charles Dickens. Quite confusing. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Israel is in the best position in the Middle East ever. And you should ask me, how come? Well, because suddenly we are not alone. Until about 10 years ago, if I had asked you, Middle East, enemies, who is engaged? You will tell me Israel is all by itself on one side, and all the Arab countries as a monolith on the other side. That was indeed the case. Not anymore today. Today we are very comfortably siding with Saudi Arabia. It's still under the table, under the radar, but it's happening. The United Arab Emirates, brand new. Egypt, Jordan, amazing. Which means that the whole political composition of the Middle East is changing as well. Not because they like us all of a sudden, because there is a big threat to the whole region, including Muslim Arab countries, and that will be Iran. Let me make a distinction which is important to understand. Arab, Muslim, not the same. When you speak about the Arab world, you call somebody an Arab. You don't indicate his nationality. It's not a religion, and it's not an ethnicity. You can be an American Arab. You can be an Israeli Arab. And therefore, to make the connection, as most people do, that an Arab has to be a Muslim, and all the Muslims are Arabs, that's a mistake. You can be a Christian Arab. You can be a Jewish Arab. Because Arab is a culture, civilization, language, a way of life, and a mindset as well. Most of the Arabs are indeed Muslims, but most of the Muslims in the world are not Arabs. Indonesia, the largest Muslim country, 230 million people who are not Arabs, but they're Muslims. Malaysia, Iran, Turkey, half of Nigeria. The most important thing maybe to understand about Middle East today is that the two main Muslim powers in the region that basically are engaged in a brutal fight to dominate the Muslim world are not Arabs. Turkey, which are Sunnis, I'm not going to that resolution, and Iran, which are Shiites, which is the problem is within the Muslim world, not within the Arab world necessarily. Confused? Of course you are, everybody is. Because most people don't understand those nuances, which are not nuances at all. These are cardinal things to understand in order to have some keys to understand what happens in the region. And therefore, things are changing, which is a decent change basically to see that fault line moving and changing. Let me try to give you a little bit of taste to understand, all right, about what happens. The statement that you see on top, I'm standing behind it 100%, okay? No Arab Muslim leader ever said that he believed that the Jews basically deserve or should have a homeland in the Middle East. Not even one. You will not find a single Arab leader who is daring to say that. And the one that did make peace with Israel, Anwar Sadat from Egypt, was murdered by Muslim Brotherhood, which is Hamas basically. But Muslim Brotherhood Egypt, Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood Palestine. And therefore, the Arab mindset will never accept. Because they call the land that we call the State of Israel sacred land to Islam. And therefore, the very existence of the State of Israel is an affront. The fact that there is a Jewish state, which is prosperous, which is a democracy, which is thriving, is something that tells the Muslims something is wrong with Islam. Because Islam is not preaching that the Muslims are humiliated or defeated as they are in most cases. It preaches victory. And look at the condition of the Arab countries. They are in a shameful condition, financially, socially. Speaking about human rights, etc., everything that you believe in happens exactly the opposite in those countries. So for the Muslim mindset, the existence of a Jewish state is something that proves that something is wrong with Islam, which they cannot admit. So what's the option? Israel has to be destroyed. Otherwise, Islam has a problem. So once you understand that motivation, you begin to understand that we are facing something that no negotiations are going to help. But then you can tell me, just a minute now, you're talking about governments maybe. What about the simple people? The common people, they have to want to live in peace, right? Because it makes so much sense. Talk to them. Well, countries in the Middle East are dictatorships. There are no elections over there, no democracy, so I don't have access to talk to a farmer that lives on the banks of the River Nile in Egypt and ask him what does he think about the Jewish state. I have to somehow trust the governments. But the governments are not representing the sentiments of the people. What are the options? Well, only twice. For the last 60, 70 years, they had free elections in Arab entities. Free elections meaning that people had the chance to vote. The West was sending a lot of delegations to check and see that this is indeed a democratic procedure. Because if Egypt wants money from America, and America says, we'll give you some money, but you have to be a democracy, they cannot say no to those inspectors coming in to watch how the process goes on. It happened for the first time among the Palestinians. Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State, and she said that if the Palestinians want to be recognized as a nation, it has to be a democracy, and therefore you go and vote. And they voted. Who do you think won the elections big time? 75% of the vote went to a group called Hamas. Now, Hamas is a Palestinian Arab group which has a very clear agenda, and that's the Muslim religion and not the Palestinian nationality. And that was a shock, not for us. We told Ms. Rice, listen, if that's what you're hoping for, it will be in vain. The Muslim agenda will win. And they did. Egypt, a big Arab country, the largest Arab country, more than 100 million people. Elections in 2012. Free elections. Who won the elections in Egypt? Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafists. 75 to 78% of the vote. So I cannot really say that the leaders are not representing the people's sentiment. On the contrary, the leaders are more moderate because we have peace with Egypt. Yet most Egyptians will follow the Muslim agenda, which means they don't want peace with Israel, they want to see Israel destroyed. So if I need to go down to the level of the common Arab Muslim in the region, I know what they think. So it's not something theoretical. If they could only do that, they would not hesitate. And you know what? We have to believe them because they don't hide their intentions. They keep saying the same message over and over again. Sometimes it's translated to English and it's a little more moderate, but they do not hide their intention. So why don't we believe them when they say that their goal is to simply wipe Israel out from the surface of the planet? Now we live there. We know they mean business because we have to put our helmets on and take fire every now and then, so we know the true story. The problem is you need support from the world, even political support. And now we're in a better situation because world leaders begin to understand what Israel is facing for the last 70 years because of what the media call the Arab Spring. You all heard the term. Started in Syria in the 18th of March, 2011. This is a misleading term. Maybe a better term will be the Muslim freezing winter and not the Arab Spring. Because the idea of a spring is something new, it's green, it's beautiful. But you see, we misunderstand something. Everything was presented that people are fighting for the rights. What can be wrong with people fighting for the rights? You will support that, right? Did you ever ask yourselves what are the rights that these people are fighting for? Well, that's a problem. If I want the right to take you out, I don't want you to have those rights. You see my point? Words matter. Translations are tricky. And sometimes when you translate from one language to the other without understanding what stands behind that, it misleads the whole conversation. Because if I want to live by Sharia Muslim principles, by all means, I don't object it. You want to live by Sharia law, that's fine. But if part of what you believe in as part of your right is to wipe me out, do I want you to have such rights? Now you tell me, if anybody in this room will vote willingly, when you have a chance, for a leadership, that the main agenda over there is against everything that I will say we believe in. There's no human rights, there's no free education, no freedom of the press, no freedom of basically almost anything. The abuse of women, children, as we understand it in the West, okay? Why would anybody that has a right or chance to vote will vote for that agenda? Would you vote for such leadership? I don't think so. Now, they think that that's what they want. Who am I to tell them that they are wrong? I think that the days that the US of A is trying to bring democracy to people in the Middle East are over. President George Bush was an ideologist, I have no doubt in my mind, to bring the Iraqi people freedom. Did anybody ask the Iraqis if they want that kind of freedom? Once again, it was a great idea. Because how else can people live if not in the same way that I live, I believe they should live? We just misunderstand one another. Not everybody is interested in the rights and liberties as we understand them. They tried in Afghanistan, wasn't really working, right? Now, the Middle East was a very stable place when it was a place full of dictatorships. Nobody liked Saddam Hussein in the West, but Iraq was a functioning state. Nobody liked Bashar al-Assad, Syria, but Syria was a functioning state. And then we speak about right to these places. Look what happens. Everything falls apart. And therefore, we are missing something in that conversation as we try to understand the other side. Can you see that, or it's maybe a little too far away? I'm not sure. Anyhow, just some statements made by prominent Arab leaders vis-a-vis the existence of Israel. Now, these are not a bunch of nobodies. These are the leaders of the Arab countries. These were stated about 10 years ago. Nothing changed in that mindset. But basically, that's what they aspire. And therefore, to make it even worse, they will say, listen, even if Israel is dealing with the Palestinians, which is the main issue basically on a daily basis, not the overall issue, which may be Iran, it's a holy land for Islam. So the Palestinians cannot make decisions in our behalf. We want to have a say as well as Muslims because Jerusalem is the third holiest place to Islam. Did you know that Jerusalem is not even mentioned in the Quran, which are the Muslim scriptures, not even once? That's another story. Which means even if we are going to negotiate successfully some kind of a peace plan with the Palestinians, the Arab countries have the right to say, just a minute now, we have to have our say as well, because it's not just a Palestinian issue, it's a Muslim issue. So once again, we're going back to the core issue, which is religious and not necessarily political. Well, this will be the new fault line, and you see kind of both sides and kind of coalitions that are operating together, and that's how the Middle East is arranged today. And again, we are siding with some countries not because they like us all of a sudden. They do understand that they are facing an existential threat, which is Iran, and they cannot make it without Israel. The United Arab Emirates did not make peace the Abraham Accords about a year and a half ago with Israel because suddenly they agreed that there should be a Jewish state in the area. They are bordering with Iran. Iran is a threat. They need to have a powerful ally. We are the solution, not the problem, as some people thought until not that long ago. So suddenly, we find ourselves among friends in the region, which is new to us. We are used to be criticized all the time. We don't know what to do with all these compliments that everybody's giving us. We'll have to learn how to live with it. Well, as you can see, there's a lot of information over there, and I don't want to go word by word, just some basic things. As I started saying, that the whole idea behind the Arab Spring was basically the regimes collapsed, but you view that now, 10 years later, did anything change in the Middle East? Not really. Egypt is once again under the leadership of a president, as it was under Mubarak. Now the name is Assisi. Syria is in total chaos. There's no country called Libya anymore. Lebanon hardly functions. Yemen is in pieces. Libya doesn't exist. Tunisia, question. 10 years after this great Arab Spring, things are getting worse all the time. These countries cease to exist. There is no, I will say, independent entity that functions like a state. Not in Syria, not in Lebanon, questionable about Egypt and other countries as well. And the main reason, as we said, is Iran. Because once a regime was losing its grip and some issues started, Iran did not initiate this unrest. But once they could go inside and take advantage of unrest in a certain country, they would not hesitate, working through proxies. I need to understand the distinction of Shiites and Sunnis, two main groups in the Muslim world, and I'm not going to go into that resolution, but the Shiites only make 15 to 20% of the total number of Muslims. And it will be a Shia country that will have the nuclear weapon before all the others. Now that's scary, not to Israel. We have our ways to deal with it, the Sunni countries. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, they will not have access to these countries. And let me tell you something, I'm sorry to say that, Iran will have nuclear weapons, all right? Regardless of what President Biden says, regardless of what my prime minister says, too late to stop them, simply too late to stop them. Because everything that we know about the Iranian nuclear plan is only what Iran was willing to surrender to the West. After Western satellites, and Israel is one of 7 nations only that have satellites in the outer space. When you started noticing these, Iran said, well, you know what, yes, this is something for the nuclear plan, but it's all peaceful. Is it possible that we missed something? There was one facility that nobody found yet. How naive can somebody be to say, oh, we know everything about the program? I think it's a little too late. So the question will be not who has the weapon, who is protected from the weapon. We'll get to that a little later on. Because the mindset now is changing from offensive to defensive. And that changes a lot of things in the way that you prepare for war, etc. We'll get to that a little later. So we speak about something that you don't really know how to understand. By the way, when you say nuclear weapon, what exactly do you mean? Well, let me tell you, okay? Number one, you have to have the nuclear warhead, right? And you have to place it on a ballistic rocket. When it's becoming a weapon, if the warhead is not installed on the rocket, is it a weapon, yes or no? Because you need to put them together. You see my point, right? So Iran can be in a position that they are not going to put the warhead on the ballistic missile, so they say, we don't have a weapon yet. Yes, we can make it in 20 minutes, but right now we don't have a weapon. And that will be something that the Western politicians can also hide behind. It's not a weapon. It's not together. They cannot fire it. The problem is that the nuclear deal is taking the world's attention. What happens on the ground every day, that's the problem. Not nuclear warfare, conventional issues that we have and deal with on our borders almost every day. So even that very clear term, nuclear weapons, is not very clear. When are these components are called a weapon? You see my point, right? So maybe we can say that, yes, Iran will not have in the near future the whole thing ready to be fired or launched. But if they have everything ready in separate places, it shouldn't take that long for them to make that weapon. And for that reason, Iran, very cleverly, they are enriching uranium. They go to a certain level, which is not to overstep a certain line to get the world mad, but they can do that within days. And stopping that will be very, very hard. So the question is not who has the weapon, because once they will have it, others will have it as well. Who is protected from the weapon? And as I said a little later on. Look at a map, and that's a map basically that I'm trying to show you. And that will be, again, we speak about Iran before we are diving in to speak more about Hamas and the Palestinians, but that will be the story, give or take. As we said, Iran exploited fully the chaos in the area. They did not initiate some of these revolutions, but once the regime was losing its control, and every country has a Shiite group in it, they're a small minority, but these are the proxies of Iran. So Hezbollah in Lebanon is maybe the most famous one, but not the only one. So from my selfish perspective, the way that we see this octopus, right, sending its arms, using those proxies, they are at our borders already. And what we can do to try to stop them, but we are not engaged directly with the Iranians, it's working through proxy, which means Iranian proxies can, in a way, cause some problems on Israel's territory. Our retaliation is not against Iran, it's against those proxies. But sooner or later, we'll have to take some of the war to Iranian territory. If our land is directly attacked by Iranian proxy, we don't have proxies, all right? Somehow we need to balance that equation that if our land is really threatened, so will be yours. So the fact that there is an Iranian proxy that operates from Syria, and we retaliate just against that militia in Syria, we are missing the point. And you begin to hear some statements made, and world leaders begin to understand the problem. But for years and years, we were all by ourselves trying to convince the world about what happens. Because you see, Iraq is on one side, Afghanistan on the other side. I'm afraid that you guys went to the wrong targets. It was supposed to be Iran to begin with 20 years ago, maybe not Iraq. I'm not criticizing anybody's policy. Everybody was confused, nobody knew what was going on. But I have to be honest with you that Israel always stated the problem is Iran. Unfortunately, we were right. We had a prime minister that was in office until a few months ago that tried to stir up the whole world, pointing at Iran as the main problem. And some leaders did agree and some did not. But the problem is that it's very hard to stop them by now. So they control 4 capitals in the region, including now controlling Yemen, which is a major problem because of the straits that go from the Indian Ocean into the Red Sea to the Suez Canal. You know what will happen if they will start firing on these big tankers that go to the Suez Canal? Then it will be a global issue that will have to be dealt with right away. So they control some strategic areas, not Iran directly. Iran doesn't want retaliation against its territory. A proxy. The Houthis in Yemen. You give them weapons and you give them the order. All they have to do is fire one rocket, and the world trade is going to be paralyzed. There was a shortage already, right, in containers, in everything. Look about the Suez Canal. One tanker got stuck there for about 2 weeks, and nobody knew what to do. So they really hold some very strategic locations, which should be a global concern. Indeed it is. I'm just pointing out at the area that the US of A left, and they made a message yesterday. You still had some troops in Syria and northern Iraq. All right, and officially they said they're going to pull them out, plus Afghanistan. So there will be very few American boots on the ground in the Middle East. Now again, American policy, I have nothing to make any comments about it. I'm not in that position. The problem is the way we see that, there's no vacuum. Somebody will fill in the vacuum. Anybody wants to guess who that may be? Well, you do understand. Proxies of Iran and Turkey. Going back for just a minute, you do see the red arrow that goes from Iran into Syria and then into Lebanon. Syria is a key player because of its weakness. Amazing. Sometimes the weaker you are, the more influential you are. Because Iran cannot supply their proxies in Lebanon, for example, with weapons, unless they go through Syria. We control the airspace. We control the seas. We don't control the land borders. And therefore, the American presence recently was basically blocking that corridor, trying to stop the flow of weapons from Iran into Syria. So the American troops are out. Somebody will take their place, maybe Turkey, impossible to tell. And the way we see that we will have to be more active. Because there is a struggle goes on all the time. Maybe it's not an official war, and you don't see the vision of tanks going from place to place. But the war goes on. And you have some breaking news. Somebody attacked a caravan of lorries that carried something from some place to some place. End of breaking news. And you wonder what on earth is going on. It's not a great secret. There are a few things that Israel will not let Lebanon have. When we have a concrete piece of information about the caravan, we'll take them out. It goes on all the time. Sometimes we take responsibility officially, and sometimes we don't. But the only thing that we can do is to try to keep those proxies as far away from our borders as possible. Add to that ISIS. ISIS didn't go anywhere, by the way. ISIS did not disappear. They're still there. They are more active now in Afghanistan. All right, so the last two blasts in mosques, Shia mosques in Afghanistan, Kandahar, yesterday, maybe somebody was watching the news, is basically ISIS. So you see, it's a war within Islam. All right, so let's kind of zoom in. I'm watching the clock, all right? So I'll try to keep the time. It won't be easy. And say a few words when you come to the neighborhood. And boy, we live in a tough neighborhood, as you understand. We like to call ourselves, and forgive me for this kind of almost like arrogance, we are a villa in a jungle. But when you look at the Middle East and you see the poor condition of people, and you see the way that people live, you see the conflicts in those countries because the mindset in the Arab society is more clan-oriented. It's not national. It's hard to speak about national terms. By the way, when you say Muslim nation, it's supposed to be an oxymoron because Islam does not believe in nationalities, but in one caliphate where all the Muslims are together under one leadership. Together we are strong. So when you divide them to nations, basically you are weakening their position and their influence. So the term Arab nation is something that people that have a Muslim agenda don't really like. Because the focus should be on one entity that includes all the Muslims. So ISIS spoke about a caliphate. That would be the ambition. All right? But they are divided to nations. And as you can see on the map over there, Syria, as we said, a country that doesn't really control its territory, and the border is called Golan Heights. Some of you have been there. And we can just see how they build bases over there, they build bunkers. Every now and then we have to retaliate. Doesn't happen every day. All right? It happens every now and then. And the thing is that in all that kind of story I'm telling you, not just that life goes on in Israel. We don't wake up every morning to put our helmets on and go to the bomb shelter. We are prosperous, we are strong, we are thriving, strong economy, we are building, we are paving. But somebody's watching carefully about what's cooking in the region, and every now and then we have to retaliate. It doesn't affect daily life. But it may. It may if we don't take care about it now. So we are watching what happens in Lebanon. We are watching what happens in Syria. Jordan is an ally and basically an American stronghold in the region because east of Jordan is Iraq. And Iraq doesn't control anything anymore. And then Iran, which means you can go through Jordan and come 15 miles away from Jerusalem. That's it. Can you believe that? And therefore, Jordan is a buffer. Jordan is a stronghold which is protecting, in a way, Jordanian territory, but Israel as well. So we're good friends, allied with the Jordanians. And then we have the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip area. There's two main militias over there. One is called Hamas. I'm sure that some of you heard the name. I don't know what is the level of your interest and how deep you are immersed in Middle Eastern affairs, but the name Hamas is kind of famous, and Islamic Jihad. The agenda is the same. It's nuances, all right? It's one objective to destroy Israel. And these are the people that we're supposed to negotiate with. Where do you begin? When I tell you right up front, we are not negotiating, we want to destroy you. By the way, send some food in because we're starving to death. What's wrong with that sentence, huh? And we do. So we need to speak about the Palestinians and to make a distinction. You see the West Bank over there, you see the Gaza Strip. And these two are important because this is the homeland of the Palestinians, so to speak. All right? And Israel is willing to recognize that the Palestinians are a nation that has a right for a homeland. You show me one Palestinian leader to say that against vis-a-vis Israel. I believe that the Jews have a right for a homeland. Not even once. So they want us to recognize the Palestinian homeland. They will never, ever recognize a Jewish homeland. And this is the opening stage for negotiations. So you do understand it's a non-starter. How can you start negotiating where these are the opening positions of the other party? Well, the Gaza Strip is an area which is not that big geographically. Maybe the most kind of condensed area in the Western world, definitely about 2 million people that live in terrible conditions. All right? People over there are not happy and are not wealthy. They live in terrible conditions. We speak about poverty. We don't speak about hunger. We speak about 65 to 70% of unemployment, not because there's no money to start an economy. The leaders are using the money to buy weapons and to build bunkers and not for the well-being of the people. And again, it's not propaganda. Listen to what they say and listen to what the world says about what happens in Gaza. Israel is allowing messengers from Qatar, and Qatar is the biggest promoter of terrorism in the world, all right? Please mark my words. Somebody comes every month with a briefcase, $65 million, well, maybe two, I don't know how much fits in, cash, coming from our territory to give to the Palestinians over there. But who takes the money? Hamas. So the ordinary people don't even see that money. And let me remind you, they voted for Hamas in elections. Maybe they didn't know what's coming. I mean, they had the right to vote. That's the kind of a regime that people voted for. So Gaza will be the one that we are going to speak about. As we said, we pulled out from the Gaza area in 2005. Not a single Israeli lives in Gaza. Now you see rallies all around the world. People marching the streets of Paris and Rome and London with huge banners, "Free Gaza." Free Gaza from whom? Excuse me. We're no longer there. The 31st of August 2005, the last Israeli closed the gates behind his back. No Israelis in Gaza. So free Gaza from whom? And of course, the whole world wants to see Israel supplying Gaza with everything. Give me one reason to do that. People that are committed to take us out, and I'm supplying them with fuel, electricity, I kid you not, we do, all right? With food, with pharmaceutics, and they fire rockets at us in return. You tell me what would be the logic to any country to operate like that? So now the Palestinians basically are divided into two. We pulled out from Gaza. They had elections. Hamas won the elections. The PLO decided not to surrender the power, and there was a civil war between the two. And it ended in the following way. The PLO, which is Palestinian Liberation Organization, focused on Palestinian/nationality, occupies or whatever, lives in the West Bank, and Hamas is controlling Gaza. And they are at war with one another. So when the world wants Israel to negotiate with the Palestinians, if you only appease them just a little more, it will have to lead to peace. Well, who represents the Palestinians? We speak about two different entities, which are not in good terms. Who are we supposed to talk to? Well, the world says you need to talk to the president of the Palestinians, Mahmoud Abbas. Well, he lost the elections. He's not representing anybody. He cannot deliver. To be honest with you, we cannot deliver either. Under this composition of the government in Israel, we cannot deliver any kind of a peace plan vis-a-vis the Palestinians, but we did in the past more than once. Every offer Israel set on the table was always turned down, always, always. Without even, well, let's talk and see what happens. And we offered the West Bank and the Gaza area to the Palestinians more than once. They said no. And we did not understand. So what is it that you want? If that's not enough, if our maximum doesn't meet your minimum, what are you looking for? Oh, well, now we know. It's no longer a secret. If you deal in behalf of Islam as a religion, nothing is enough. It's us or them. If that's the choice, I'm sorry, it's us and not them. It doesn't have to be like that. But recently, that will be the new approach because we speak about religion. Now, Israel never spoke in religious terms. of course, it's part of our motivation. That's what the Bible tells us. It's the land that was promised to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses by the burning bush. So there's no question about that. The question is, what do we do now to try to save lives, to try to let people live in a way without giving up about the future and whenever on God's timing, all right, He's going to keep His promise. So people are willing to negotiate from the Israeli side. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in the promise made to the Jews by God Himself for now. We want to find a solution on God's timing. It will be indeed from the brook of Egypt all the way to the Euphrates. He knows the timing. We don't. So with the Palestinians, we do have an issue, as you understand. It wasn't always the case because we negotiated, we had an agreement, and now Hamas is a new component, so to speak, in this whole story. And again, I do want to make some progress, all right? So just to say a few words, forgive me for skipping here. Well, who is Hamas? Let's try to explain that, all right? We speak about a movement which is basically Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood is an Arab movement, okay? Founded in Egypt by a man called Muhammad Abna, 1932. He wrote a book which is the Arab version of Hitler's Mein Kampf, all right? That's a platform of the Muslim Brotherhood, basically vis-a-vis the Jews. They're active in social activities, educations, they do have other businesses. When it comes to the Jewish story, it's not even anti-Jewish, it's anti-Israel. Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood Palestine. You have Muslim Brotherhood Jordan, Egypt, Syria, that will be Hamas. So they are part of a much larger movement that has one goal when it comes politically, and that will be to destroy Israel. And don't trust me, all right? You cannot really trust me. I have an agenda. Go and check. They say it loud and clear. So it's not that I'm bringing you some kind of fake news, as it's so common to say in America recently. They don't hide their intention. The question is, why don't we listen? Because when you listen and you understand, you have to respond. And the response will be, unfortunately, not peaceful, but violent. And we're sick and tired from bloodshed and violence. So we pretend that we are deaf. We just don't understand the message. But the message is out there, and they say it all the time. We are not winning time here. Things are not getting better as a result of ignoring that kind of an agenda. So we speak about a group which is very aggressive in many ways to their own people, not vis-a-vis, but their own people. They resolve issues usually violently. We speak about clans of people, we speak about different groups which are Muslim-oriented. People are not free in the Gaza area. Not because of Israel, we are not there. So free Gaza from whom? Now people will say, of course, but you have a blockade around Gaza. You won't let in anything except if you want to. Well, it's only part of the truth. I'll show you the next map. Gaza has a border with Egypt. They're beloved brothers and sisters. Why won't Egypt supply Gaza with everything Gaza needs? Why we have to do that? And we do, by the way, which is really amazing. You show me an example in world history. The two people were at war, and during war, one people supply the other with everything that they need to carry on the fight. It doesn't make any sense. Well, I'll be proud to say that this is a very important Jewish principle. Lives matter, and not everybody is a terrorist on the other side. Not all the Palestinians in Gaza are bad people, so to speak. But out of 1.5 million, if 1.1 voted for a certain agenda, and about 500,000 are active, how do you separate the bad guys from the other guys? I don't know how to do that. And the bad guys don't even wear uniforms. So how do you know who's the terrorist to go after? You don't understand our frustration in a way. The easiest will be, somebody told me once, why don't you nuke Gaza? I never heard the term nuke. Now I know what that means. So, what do you mean nuke Gaza? We speak about people that live there. Most of them are just simple people that want to live. Oh, you don't know the Bible, you have to wipe them out. Just a minute now, all right? I'm considered to be a little more militant among some of my friends. But nuking Gaza? It's the easiest thing to do, right? Well, we don't do things like that. Democracies don't do things like that. So how do you send money into Gaza or food? And after it crosses the checkpoint, you have no idea who seizes it. But I can bet you, not the people that need that. Because the border crossings are controlled by Hamas. So you send in a truck full of, I don't know, goodies, whatever, M&Ms. And you think that's going to go to the kids of Gaza, right? After it crossed, you have no idea what happens. We send in sacks of cement to rebuild houses that were destroyed. And we said, well, since we think that Hamas may seize them, let's add a chip to every sack, and we can watch it, all right, with drones, where it ends, in the house of Abdallah or maybe someplace else. Well, it did go to the house of Abdallah, but right after the drone operator was satisfied and turned his attention to another place, somebody showed up, took the sack of cement, and went to dig a tunnel. So with all the money that flows in and all the provisions, people are still miserable because their regime is exploiting all the resources to keep building assault tunnels and building their rockets. And that will not be propaganda to say they don't really care about the well-being of the people. People from Gaza come to seek medical attention in Israel. We allowed it. We allowed it. In one occasion, a young woman came to the crossing, a place called Erez, on the way to Beersheba for surgery. Simple procedure. You go into a big room which has glass walls all around, 45 glass. Simple procedure. She had a bomb around her waist. So why do we let them come to hospitals if that would be the approach? Now, she didn't even know that she's carrying something. Somebody came to her, promised money for the family, gave her a nice belt, and even a little heavy. She didn't even know that they're going to send her like a sheep to be slaughtered and to explode herself. That's how it works. We do not understand that. We don't think like that. We just don't operate like that. Democracies cannot grasp the idea of that kind of terror, of militias, of... So how is a democracy supposed to respond? And to be very careful after whom you're going, and to separate the good guys from the bad guys. Well, we try. It doesn't always work. If you can see that, please read Article 28 in the Charter of Hamas, published in November 15th of 1988. Can you see that? Or it's, and just, read all the way down. Well, this is like a proclamation of independence. People want to show the world who are they, what they believe in. And that's the kind of language. Especially the paragraph down below. All right, that we stood at the entrance of Temple Mount, and we shouted with joy, Muhammad is dead, left daughters behind. What exactly do you mean when you write that in your document, that that's how you want the world to think about you? Or read this one. Very clearly stated, right? Nothing is going to work. We are determined to do whatever possible to destroy the Jewish state. As I said earlier, please send some food. We are starving. So these are the people that we are dealing with, and I have to say it once again. I'm only using Hamas as an example because it represents a mindset that you find in other places called radical Islam. Not all the Muslims think like that. Not all of them. There are about 1.5 billion Muslims on the planet. Most of them are just simple people that want to live their lives. But if you have 15% of people which are militant, so to speak, which is an estimate, a fair estimate, you've got yourself more people than America's population. And let me ask you this. You never pull the trigger, you never build a bomb, but you send your money to support these people. Are you a radical, yes or no? So you do understand what we are dealing with. And I have to say it once again, not all of them are like that. But I never saw, never ever, and you didn't either, a rally of Muslims anywhere on the planet rallying for peace. Never ever. Check your memories and tell me when was the last time that there was a rally of Muslims that marched as Muslims and they demonstrated and demanded peace. Not even once. What does it say about people? You hear my point, right? Okay, so far with the Charter of Hamas. And of course, the way that Hamas operates is, you see that in other places as well. You simply exploit all of the resources that you can get, not for the well-being of the people. You do whatever you can, all right, to build your little workshops and to manufacture your rockets and bring them in as well. Some we seize, some we don't. You know how much it costs to make a very simple Qassam rocket? About $100. If you want to intercept it with an Iron Dome missile, that's $40,000. So you do the math, all right? how much we can basically take when we have kind of rain of rockets flying at us. I'm going to skip this one as well. Well, again, the news usually and the way that Israel is presented is that we are creating and we are causing. You hear the name genocide and apartheid and all those names which are absolutely nonsense, all right? And don't trust me, don't believe me, you go and check. When I'm checking people, you say apartheid. What do you mean apartheid? I'll give you an example. People do not understand Israeli Arabs or Israelis or Palestinians. Palestinians are not Israelis. I don't control their lives, so how can they be in an apartheid state when they're not in my country? People say, oh, you're an apartheid within Israel. So we'll give you an example. Give you one example. And somebody thought for about half, so you know what? In the Haifa University, there's not a single course in Arabic. So the word is Israel, study Hebrew and go to study in Hebrew. You're right. That's apartheid. But it's so easy to throw those terms, and everybody says, apartheid. Just give you an example. Genocide. The life expectancy of the Palestinians now is 81 years of age for men and women alike. In 1967, when we conquered the West Bank, was 48. The population grows. What kind of genocide is it when the population grows? You see my point. But it's so easy. The media, the academia, universities, genocide. It's so easy, right, to discredit everything. When I say, well, you know what, I'm willing to debate. Give me one example. There was no example. Because there's no genocide, there's no apartheid. Israel has, in the big cities, buses which have two compartments. Actually, it looks like a little train. And one of my groups, somebody said to me, oh, it's a great idea. Jews in the front and Arabs in the back, right? I said, where did you get it from? Aren't you in an apartheid state? No, we are not, okay? But President Carter wrote a book that said Israel is an apartheid state. Shame on him, because he knows better. Then he had to admit, well, I wanted to get people's attention, so it had to be a provocative title. Really. Yes, you hear some bitterness in my voice, okay? But people just, throw these terms in, and you say, well, where do you begin? When nobody has to prove anything, and words are cheap, which basically they are, unfortunately. Well, since Hamas is committed, and they do a great job, I have to say. If I was maybe a Palestinian, the things that the Jewish state is oppressing me, who knows, maybe I would be also a Muslim militant, which is a possibility, which is not the case. But they dedicate all the resources to dig those tunnels. And they do a very clear plan. The plan was, it was almost executed. In the last operation, Cliff Edge was the name of it, to dig those tunnels under the border into Israeli communities, to send their troops into the very heart of those kibbutzim, which is a farming community, and to start the wide operation over there. It didn't help, it didn't happen. So today we are digging a big wall along, build that wall, huh? Let me tell you what, walls are working. I know it's an American hot debate, so I'm not going there, but it works in Israel. So there was a wall, and kind of a steel wall that goes about 40 feet underground. So that's not an option anymore. These assault tunnels are good for nothing. So they have only one option. If you want to carry on the struggle, rockets and missiles. So our countermeasure was to develop the Iron Dome, as we call it. Let me just say one word about the Iron Dome. Maybe some of you heard about it. I don't know. Again, what is your level of knowledge? It's an amazing system. It was programmed. Most of the money comes from the US, local technology, Israeli technology, and it made headlines in the news about a month ago when the budget was issued or there was a problem with in the Senate or the Congress about the budget, so they had to separate that because some of the progressive or regressive said that, hey, we're not selling weapons to the aggressor anyhow. This is, again, American issues. I don't want to go there. But the Iron Dome is an amazing technology, and it works. I mean, they scored in the last conflict about 91% of success. It's a defensive weapon system. Let me give you this scenario, okay? Somebody in Gaza, and that can be out of the blue, all right? They don't have a reason to open fire. The reason is that Israel exists. That's it. So there's no ceasefire. We never signed a ceasefire. We don't talk to Hamas. They don't talk to us. We try to recognize them in a way because we want to divide and conquer. That's Israel's policy. as long as the Palestinians are divided to PLO and Hamas, Israel can claim, who are we going to negotiate with? They have to be united first. Sounds like a legitimate policy, right? At the same time, we do whatever we can to keep them separated. I'll be quick to admit, okay? So if you say that Hamas you are going to talk to, you undermine the position of the PLO. And therefore, it is our policy to divide and conquer, to be very honest with you. But right now, our position is, unless the Palestinians are united, we're not negotiating because they cannot deliver. And the world is willing to accept it. At the very same time, when you deal with Hamas directly, well, through a third party in Egypt, it's basically acknowledging Hamas almost as an entity which undermines the position of the PLO. And so far it's working. So think about these militias over there, and that can be without any reason. They just do this, and a rocket flies to Israel's territory. And the system is working. It has a radar called Green Pine, and the radar can, within 1/10 of a second, to predict where the rocket is going to fall. If it's falling in a place which is not occupied, no people, no assets, you don't even bother. Let it fall. At the same time, they operate the Sirens national system, and 2 million people run to the bomb shelters. And that can happen because somebody in Gaza was not happy with the scrambled eggs his wife made for breakfast that morning, and that's how he shows his discontent. I kid you not. Sometimes there are issues within those gangs over there. If you want to show how strong you are, you fire a rocket into Israel. And 2 million people run to the bomb shelters. Who can live like that? Why are we accepting such a situation? Well, the answer is simple, because any retaliation will take a toll of death in the Gaza side, including civilians. We try to avoid that. Now, their weapons, by definition, when you fire a rocket into a city, that's a weapon of terror. We invested a fortune, and the US as well, to minimize collateral damage. You launch a rocket from 10 miles away into a window that big, all right? We speak about drones and target killings. We did, I guess, minimize the death of many innocent civilians. But if you fire a rocket from a kindergarten, you understand the problem. Here's a scenario for you. There is a school. School is in session, make no mistakes, all right? Kids are running around, and at the corner, you see a little Katyusha launcher, a little Qassam, whatever, and somebody is about to fire the rocket. And you have a tenth of a second decision, because we have our drones in the air. Are you going to take him out? And possibly some kids that play around. Because if you don't, your child may be killed because you happen to live by the Gaza Strip area. What would you do? It's a dilemma. I wish I could have told you it's black and white. It's not. We do have lots of shades and shapes inside. It's not an easy decision to make. And I can show you, well, until 2006, I was very active in the military. We had to call off, we didn't have to, we called off operations because we knew that civilians will be killed. That's the last thing that you want to do. But if the option is your children dead or theirs, I'm sorry. If somebody has to die, it won't be on my side. If I'm strong enough and good enough to stop that. And the choice is very unpleasant. So the Iron Dome has one major problem. Let me share that with you. And again, it's just an opinion of mine, okay? So take it or leave it. The fact that the Iron Dome is so effective, Israel is thinking in defensive terms recently, which is not good. It's hard to win anything by playing defense. The thing is so good that if somebody fires a rocket from Gaza into Israel and we intercept it, no damage was done, right? So there's no urgency to retaliate because nothing happened basically. If there's no urgency to retaliate, they will fire again. And they are encouraged. And the fact that they are able to fire, it's a victory already. You listen to their media. We bombed Tel Aviv. That's a great victory. The rockets never made it to Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv didn't even feel the rockets. It doesn't matter. The fact that they were able to launch. And then we took them out. So nothing happened on the Israeli side. So why retaliate? So we are choosing not to retaliate sometimes because no damage was done on our side, which makes them more encouraged. You understand this vicious cycle, how it works? It never ends. Never ends. Let me say this. The Iron Dome is protecting Gaza more than it is protecting Israel. If we did not have the Iron Dome and Palestinian rockets will kill Israelis, we would retaliate with everything that we have and we would wipe Gaza out. They should be thankful for the Iron Dome. Maybe they are, I don't know. But they know all too well. They can fire rockets. Israel's retaliation will be minimal because these rockets are good for nothing, because they intercept 91% of them. It's crazy. The problem is that we are getting more defensive in our mindset. When I asked you earlier, let me just try to close with that, and I made a comment that it's not who will have the weapon, who is protected from the weapon. Let me ask you a philosophical question, okay? It's a question of philosophy, not a question of warfare. Let's say that Iran has the weapon. And let's say that the regime over there thinks they have a chance now because of many reasons. They want to launch one rocket at Israel's territory. And somebody presses the red button. And the rocket is flying to the outer space. We have another system which is better, not better, longer range called the Arrow. They guarantee 99% of success. The problem is the 1% they do not guarantee. And we intercepted the ballistic missile. No damage was done. No radioactive foliage, absolutely nothing. Do we have the right to respond by using our nuclear weapons that we never admitted that we have, knowing that the Iranians are not protected, and such a weapon will kill hundreds of thousands? What say you? You understand my point? So maybe it's not about developing weapons of offense, but focus on defense. And the Israeli mindset, and this is just an opinion, all right, which is not that good in the Middle East to play defense. But you begin to see that the mindset begins to change. And the question is now, how can we invest more in defending ourselves than taking the enemy out? Because if we were known for one thing, till recently, there was a problem, we'll move in, we'll take care of our things, we'll come out. If that's motivation and that's capability is kind of being diminished, I will say that we will have to deal with some problems. Please read the words of Colonel Richard Camp, who was the commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, and he was invited to testify to one of those committees of the UN, and he made his statement. Of course, nobody made a big issue out of his statement. The focus was, of course, on Israel's brutality, but he knows exactly what Israel does. You do see the crossing over there at Kisufim, tons of food waiting to go into Gaza. And by the way, Hamas usually is using mortar rockets, all right, or mortar shells, usually to bomb these places as we send the food in, okay, because we insist that somebody will go inside to see how the food is being distributed, and they will not have that. And so forth and so forth. And let me bring all that to conclusion, if I may, because I'm watching the clock, and I do have a few more minutes. Oops, I'm sorry. Please look at that thing over there, okay? And I'm just bringing it right to you because we do speak about principles that I believe that Israel and America are sharing. I do believe that we are sister democracies. We speak about Judeo-Christian principles. That's what we are supporting. I will dare to say so, some other principles as well. Now you tell me, how come you hear from great thinkers and you hear from great scholars that are taking the Western side, supporting all those principles, and then in the Israeli-Arab conflict, they take the Arab side? It doesn't make sense to me. And of course, you can choose any side that you want. But if you're going to support those principles that only Israel is implying, not the others, how can you take in that conflict a side that works against all of your principles? My brain is limited. I have a hard time to understand that. By the way, was America ever accused for being brutal to Islam? I don't think so. Can a Muslim practice Sharia law in America? No. They can in Israel. We have 2 Sharia courthouses, and the Muslim Israeli that has an issue can take his case either to the state court or to the Sharia Muslim court, and the state respects it. Does mosque in America have minarets and the muazzin is calling for prayer? 5 a.m. till about midnight, 5 times a day. Do you have that in America? No. But nobody would accuse America for being brutal to Islam. We have it in Israel. So who's been accused all the time for their brutality? You understand my point, I guess, by now as well. So if that's the case that you see over there, I have to say that the only 3 options that I can see will bring that to conclusion. Number 1, you're a hypocrite. Number 2, you're an idiot. Number 3, an anti-Semite. And I'm sorry to say the term because I know it's kind of a loaded term. That's anti-Semitism. If you view everything by one standard, that's fair. If you single out the state of Israel, the Jewish state, and you want to apply a different set of bars, how we should behave, that's the modern sense of anti-Semitism. With these encouraging words, I'm going to bring that to some kind of a okay.
James, there you go. James, which one are you on those 3? I like Ronnie's list there. You got 3 good choices up there. All right, so I'm here to answer all the questions now that Ronnie has posed them. I'm kidding. Yeah, it is. You hopefully you understand why we have been. I've been blessed and fortunate since 1996. Ronnie's always been our guide. And every time he speaks, I feel like I'm drinking out of a fire hose. I mean, just like there's so much information, and what you see and whenever you go, when you go to Israel, my hope is that this is an educational night. I think we need to hear truth. We need to hear not just what people think or what their opinion is. On the ground information is great. When you go to Israel, I think most people, when they think of Israel, they think you're going to go there, and it's a very dangerous place. It's unsafe, and it's a scary place to be. But if you're really brave, I go, so you know that's not true. That you're going to go to Israel. When you go there, it is absolutely an incredible country. It is an amazing place, especially when you see what is surrounding it and what they have done there. And so I just want to, we're just grateful. We wanted Ryan to come and to educate you on what Israel is dealing with. And isn't it complicated? I mean, it is absolutely complicated, but here's what I know. And this is why, as Christians, and I believe this, we have a responsibility and a calling to support Israel. You read Genesis 12:3. And God was very clear. He said, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. Speaking to God, about God's people. Our church, our faith, we want to be a blessing to the people of Israel. Now, if you're interested in some more information, Ronnie has written books. They're great books. He actually has, I'm putting pressure on him. He's going to have 2. Some of you might have already bought his books. He's got a couple more that are going to be coming out. And so if you walk out this door on the left side, there's a table set up. He has some books. And if you've not gotten any of his books and you'd like to, you can order them there. He might have I think he has a few that are there you can pick up tonight. Also, did you tell them about your online, the Israel seminar? I did. Here, use this. Do it again.
Well, just the opening slide that said the Galilee Academy. So it's kind of a virtual academy, and if you're interested, we have 72 lectures divided to, how many seminars divided by 6? I don't know, a few seminars. If you want to, just to enrich your knowledge in biblical history. I'm not preaching the gospel, I don't do theology, I do history. I think that you'll find it interesting. About 45 sites in the country. Each one has a 45 minutes presentation, PowerPoint, with all the information. If that's your field of interest, Israel, I think that you'll be blessed by it. And most of it is free. You do need to subscribe for some of the things, but the rest of it is free. So check out the Galilee Academy.
So you see the web address up there. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It is great information. All right, now it's a 7-Eleven, and so I wanted to, before we depart, I wanted to see if any of you have any questions, maybe a question you'd like to ask Ronnie. We'll take a few of those if you have any. And Ronnie is not short on knowledge. I bet you he can answer just about anything. Any questions? You heard it all. You know it all. All right. Yes, Miss Julie.
This is probably a charged question. You may not be comfortable asking it, but does it matter for Israel who is running our administration
No? Did you all hear the question? Okay. I was talking to Pastor Eric on the way over here, and that was one of the things we spoke about. Presidents come and go. Administrations come and go. And as long as we believe that we do have the support of the majority of the American people, we do understand politics, we understand that presidents have an agenda, have a commitment. I will not tell you we really like this one, we didn't like the other one, but anybody that officially proclaimed Jerusalem as capital, we like him. Anybody that says that the Golan Heights are Israeli territory, we sure like him. And again, it's not an opinion. And therefore, I don't think that we had any administration that was very, very unpleasant. Maybe President Obama, but I have to tell you that on military levels, the best cooperation we ever had was in the days of Obama's presidency. So at least openly, Netanyahu, they were not good friends, and you can tell that even by the body language. But we will not make officially any statement. I think that we made a mistake a few years ago because we really chose one party and supported it very loudly. And I think that some people in the other party were not happy. So now we have to start and reconnect with the other party because some people said that Israel is getting deeper involved in American politics, which I have to agree. That was something that maybe we should not do, to be so clearly. Again, because administrations come and go, and you have to be in good terms with everybody. So as long as we have a majority of Americans that support Israel, I think that we can handle any regime. And okay, you're welcome.
He will answer any questions, so that's why I've got to stand near the mic because I'm afraid of what he's going to say. All right, anybody else? Any other questions? Oh, yes, Miss Kelly. I knew you'd have one.
Are Jewish people still coming from around the world back to Israel? Are Jewish people still coming to Israel in large numbers from around the world?
Not enough. Yeah, well, COVID changed a lot of things, but we had about 35,000 people coming in 2019. People are leaving as well. So many Israeli kids think that the world is much better outside of Israel's borders, and they will go to places. You need to understand part of the problem. You're educated in Israel, and you're a clever kid, and you serve your country in the army, and then you start a business which is so successful that somebody in Silicon Valley really wants to have it. And he offers money that we cannot compete with. So we are losing some of the best, all right, to other markets, and there's no legal way to keep them in the country. So some of the better minds of Israel are not in Israel. So they bless the world, and the law should come forth from Zion, so we really want to bless as many people as possible, but we are losing some of the best in Israel as well. And sometimes the whole plant is going to relocate and move to San Jose or someplace, which happens all the time. So it's not that people leave the country because they are upset with something. It's people that go to seek jobs and work and simply bought out by bigger companies that we simply cannot compete with money-wise. So, if somebody makes you an offer, you know that you're going to develop your skills and make a lot of money, you're tempted to do that. So still we have more on the plus side of people coming in, but not enough. The biggest problem that Israel is facing, this is a surprise to all of you, I'm sure, is demographics. I mean, we are the homeland for the Jewish people, not a Jewish state by definition, and if we are going to lose our majority in the country, which may happen based on birth rate, there's no Israel. Arab population grows faster. Ultra-Orthodox Jews that do not believe in the right of Israel to exist as a secular entity, these populations are growing fast. If you want to be a democracy and you become 49% of the population, we may lose the country without a single gunshot because of our demographics. So this was not a topic for tonight, but we do have other issues to deal with and not just nuclear weapons from Iran. Any other questions? Okay, folks, thank you for coming. I'm going home tomorrow morning, so this is my last engagement this time in America. It was a long trip. Number 82, by the way, if I can count correctly, 82 times, all 50 states. So, and one of my favorites, I don't try to flatter you, okay, is definitely South Carolina. Just a fact, just a fact. Well, thank you all for coming.
All right. Well, I was blessed tonight. I love the information. I think it's a great thing. I think and the civics team, this is a part of the civics team. They want you to not just know about things locally and nationally, but worldwide as well. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm going to pray, and then feel free to visit on your way out. There's the books over on to my left, to your right. And so you can go out there and check those out. Ronnie's hitting the road tomorrow morning about 4 o'clock in the morning. So he's going to have a great day tomorrow. So let's pray, and we'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, thank you for tonight. I thank you for Ronnie, and I just pray that you will give him safety. I know he's excited about going home to see his family. May he rest well. God, thank you for your people. I just thank you for the church. And God, I pray that we will, that not only will we be a blessing to our community, but God, may we have a heart for your people, for your land. God, I thank you so much for the privilege that so many of us have had to be there. And I pray, God, that soon we will get to go again. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.